So you started making this, and it was really for yourself, and then you started selling it. How quickly did you realize there were going to be some legal issues, even in California, where it is legal?
Well, right away. Right away. I mean, there's still such a problem with perception, first of all. So, okay, California was the first to allow for medical marijuana. It's been that way for about 20 years. But beyond doing that, there really aren't any regulations established. So it's like the Wild West, or it has been like that. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people who want to do the right thing, want to operate in a safe way, but without guidelines, without regulations, you can't really do that. And, because of the perception problem, because of the stigma problem, and because there are no clear laws, dispensaries are still being attacked, closed down, shut down. And
so literally, I mean, you're not making this up. Dispensaries in California, there was a dispensary maybe 5 blocks away from me that about 6 months ago was closed down. It was legal within the California set of laws, but federally, because it's not legal, the feds pretty much at any time could come in and stop you, right?
Right. Look, I'm at risk.
Right.
We
have no feds watching.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that. We block it.
Yeah, but and it's not even just, it's not that I guess that is the case in some instances, that the feds do come in and shut them down, but even local, municipalities are going in and shutting down places because they're using land use codes to evict people and threaten their landlords and shut places down.
Yeah. So how do you operate, knowing that that's sort of out there? It's a very precarious position to be in as a business person, right?
Yes. Well, first of all, it's a business, but for me, it's primarily a passion project. I do this because it means a lot to me to be in the industry and to help change perspectives on it. I know that, or I believe that a lot of people who are anti-marijuana are really just misinformed. There's been a lot of negative propaganda, and it's going to take some time to get good, real information out to people.
Yeah, this is sort of like, for people that are pro-marijuana, not even recreationally, but even medicinally, this is sort of the fault of, you've had the government which scared people about marijuana, right? You can think of those posters in the 60s, just like making everyone look evil, smoking weed. And then even the Hollywood side of things, Hollywood, which is obviously very liberal and pro-drug generally, but every movie related to pot is just a bunch of goofballs doing ridiculous things, so it makes it seem like it's going to make you dumb or stupid or something like that.
Yeah.
There's really nothing in between those two places, which is, well, I guess this is between those two places.
You'd be surprised at how many of us really fall in between. You're
saying most people aren't the extremes? I can't believe it.
Yeah, it's just that people are afraid to come out, and rightly so, because it is still federally illegal, and there is still the stigma attached to it. When I was working full-time in the corporate world, I definitely kept my use private because I didn't want to be judged.
Yeah.
I didn't feel ashamed, but I didn't want anyone to use that information against me. And I think that that a lot of people fall into that category, and it's a shame because it's so easy to keep those stereotypes going of the pothead, the stoner. It's easy to dismiss the whole industry if that's all you have in your head when you think about it. But there's so much more to it than that.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated by that because, I've talked about, gay people coming out. They're not trying to push anyone else into being gay. They're just coming out for themselves.
Exactly.
I've talked about this related to atheists because I get emails all the time where atheists, even in Western societies where it's okay to be atheist, will say, I'm afraid of coming out because it might have an effect on my job or my parents or my cousin or something like that. And I never thought of it really in the context of marijuana, but yeah, as a professional person, you didn't want to be seen a certain way. So how did you remove that stigma? I mean, did you go home to your parents and say, I'm going to go on and do this and smoke some weed?
Once I decided that this was important and this is what I wanted to do, I definitely made a shift to being out. And I told my parents, this is what I'm doing. I use cannabis for my migraines. I use cannabis. I'm still a good mother, productive member of society. I mean, not that they question me, but
you felt it was like sort of on you to sell your case in a way or something.
Oh, yes, yes. And it's interesting, there's still, even though they know what I do is good, they believe that I'm providing a good. But there's, they worry. They worry. They see how the laws are and see how, there's a risk.
Yeah, so one of the laws that I simply cannot believe is this Section 1 thing, right? So this is that the federal government basically says at this point that marijuana has no medical benefit.
Right.
There's a gajillion studies that show that's not true. There are a zillion examples of people like yourself that show that that's not true. I've smoked weed after hurting my knee playing basketball and felt better. So, most people know that this isn't true. But this is the Obama administration that still is backing this. So when these dispensaries are closed here in California, where again it is legal, this is coming from Obama, who's pretty good on weed. So it's so complex, isn't it?
Yes, I'd hoped for more change. I did read the other day, who knows if this is true, that Gary Johnson predicted that Obama would reclassify or declassify it on his way out? And, that's kind of.
It was Schedule 1, by the way.
Right, Schedule 1, yes.
Schedule 1.
So that would be amazing if he did that. I
had Gary Johnson on the show, and I mean, a libertarian, as I was saying at the top, a libertarian should be the most pro-weed person there is. This is you and your life,
right?
And you're not pushing it on kids. You're doing something that makes you feel better.
Yeah, I think the problem is just this. It's been this way for so long. It's hard to change course, especially when you're going pretty much 180.
Yeah.
I mean, to have cannabis on the Schedule 1, it has led to so many people suffering needlessly, being put in prison, having criminal records that affect the rest of their lives. Mm-hmm. And what's horrifying about it is that it impacts communities of color more. Mm-hmm. So this whole war on drugs is a failure. And it's been used as a way to target certain communities.
Yeah.
And
I think just this week there was something that came out that one of Nixon's advisors has now admitted that part of what they did related to criminalizing certain drugs was purposely aimed at minority communities. So it's not, you're not just picking up something and saying, this is what I think.
Exactly.
There's fact.
Yes, I read that same thing, and he admitted it was the hippies and the African Americans that they wanted to be able to go into those communities, arrest their leaders, raid their homes. That was the goal, and here we are. It's still happening. It's still happening, and so I think we're asking people, law enforcement, to give up control of this, and. There are a lot of law enforcement that believe that's for the best, but there's still resistance because it's the way we've operated for so many years.
Right. So basically, if you're a business owner like yourself, or someone at a dispensary, or if you're just somebody that likes weed, if you want this thing to flip as quickly as possible, basically you want pretty much a lawsuit to get involved where a dispensary is shut down and that case has to get up to the Supreme Court, right? Like, is that where you see that ultimately the only way we're going to stop this federally is through the Supreme Court, right?
I don't know. I mean, I just read something that I think it was Normal issued it about how that's probably not the fastest track. It's really more of a states issue, and the more states that legalize it, then
the feds will just kind of give up.
The feds will follow, hopefully. Bernie Sanders said he would deschedule it.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton said she'd move it to Schedule 2, right?
Yeah, she's waffling on this thing, as I mentioned at the top. Yeah.
But for California, at least, I can speak to that a little bit. I mean, that's what the LA Medical Cannabis Task Force is trying to accomplish here locally. California is like 49% of the national market when it comes to cannabis, and LA is the center of all of that. For us to not have common sense regulations for this industry is ridiculous. I mean, we all know it's here.
Yeah.
The majority of LA residents want it here. So how are we going to provide access to people?
I mean, is part of it that it's hard to motivate people that smoke pot? You know what I mean? Like I was trying to, at the top, I was trying to say, I'm not. It's hard to have this conversation without saying things that sound silly like that. But there's some level of that, right? Like I can think of my 4 years of college when I sat on a couch stoned. But if you had told me if I would just go next door, we could legalize it, I probably wouldn't have got up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, you know what I think is it's more fear that has stopped the community from coming together. Because when you know that you could get busted at any time, it's hard to form alliances. It promotes everyone having a mentality of being just out for themselves. That's the way it's been. People operating kind of in the shadows because they don't want to draw too much attention to themselves because who knows what's going to happen next week, But that's what the task force is trying to accomplish is, the state of California recently passed some laws that went into effect at the beginning of this year. MMRSA, Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act, which creates a path for legitimacy and licensure for everyone that's in this industry. But it's up to all the cities to then enact regulations that comply with that.
Right.
So LA does have an opportunity now, and that's what we're hoping to accomplish is to get some regulations on the books that really encourages this industry. I mean, we want it here, so what should that look like? How do we need to make that happen? Yeah,
it's so interesting because it so much reminds me of the fossil fuel versus green energy argument because obviously, like the fossil fuel lobbyists, big pharmacy has a lot of lobbyists, right? They're all paying all the politicians to basically keep weed illegal at some level, keep cannabis illegal, because they are trying to sell a lot of pills. Yeah. And it sort of goes back to what you started with about creating a garden and a life that you could grow something out of the earth that could take care of some of your problems. And yet we're so afraid of that, and we'd rather them hand it to us in pill form.
Exactly.
And then at the same time, half the commercial for that pill tells you worse things than you had to take the pill for in the first place.
Side effects may include,
Don't you think they should have to show those people having those side effects? Like they should show someone vomiting and on the toilet having diarrhea and thoughts of suicide.
That is a brilliant idea.
Instead they're hang gliding and they're dancing around and it's like, come on. But how much of that is just related to politics? That the pharmaceutical companies don't want this to happen, so.
I think that is a big part of it. I mean, the way things are benefits a lot of people. Those people don't want to see things change because that takes money out of their pockets, and it's pretty simple, But for me, it's not about getting rich. For me, it's about simplifying, like I said, and I would love to just be as self-sufficient as possible. I mean, to grow my own food, to grow my own medicine, to compost, to not have to go to a store for everything that I need. I mean, that's kind of the default mentality. You need something, you go out and buy it. You use something, you're done with it, you throw it away. Mm-hmm. And we're so disconnected from nature, from what we're doing to the environment, you know, it's so easy to not think about that. And for me, cannabis is an important part of taking care of myself, you know, in a way that, it helps me in so many ways. I don't need to go to a doctor to get it, you know.
Yeah. When you see those guys, you know, if you walk down Venice Boulevard, you know, right on the strip there, and they've got the guys all dressed in green, and they're the 420 doctors, and they got a hat on with a weed leaf and all that. Do you think that actually is doing some of the reverse effect? Because then people are like, this thing seems so silly, you know?
I think so. I see a lot of tourists taking pictures of those pot
I think
doctors.
I did it the first time.
Yeah, exactly. So it's you know, it's a spectacle, I guess. That's mostly what they're going for, I think, down there on Venice Beach.
Yeah.
But I do think it points out kind of that there isn't really that much of a difference, you know, in my mind, between medicinal and recreational.
Right.
You know, and yes, you have to get a recommendation from a physician to get it in California. Yes, it's pretty easy to do that.
Right. Have there been any, I mean, everything that I've read about what's going on in Colorado right now, I'd say 90% of it has been very good. Basically, they're bringing in a lot more tax revenue.
Right.
I haven't seen anything about crime suddenly going up or suddenly other spikes in other drug use. You know, they always say marijuana is a gateway drug. What do you say to that when people say that?
A gateway to what? That's what I wonder about. You know, I mean, okay, so I've used cannabis for many years, and I don't like to drink alcohol. I can occasionally, but it makes me sneeze. You know, I get really congested, and
There's probably
I don't.
weed you could take for that.
Yeah. I just don't really enjoy it.
Yeah.
So, and you know, I think there's been research that shows that, you know, a lot of people that can use drugs and not get addicted. You know, addiction is a problem, but to say that just because I smoke cannabis, I'm you know, headed down this road where, you know, I'll never come back. It's silly.
Well, I remember thinking how crazy it was the way they've demonized weed, because when I said at the top of the show, I had never smoked weed until I was a sophomore in college. And I remember smoking weed and then laughing or whatever went on. And I remember thinking, well, wait a minute, they've told me weed is so horrible, so what about these other drugs? So in a weird way, by demonizing weed and marijuana and cannabis, whatever we're calling it now, they actually have convinced a lot of people, I think, to try other drugs. Because then you try weed, you go, this isn't so bad.
Exactly.
Well, what about crack? I never tried crack, but I'm just saying.
Yeah. No, I understand, because it's so clearly misinformation, you know, and people aren't stupid, you know, so it does send the wrong message.
Yeah, what do you think about how I noticed that a lot of my friends who used to be huge potheads either don't smoke anymore or barely ever smoke, or when they do, they only need the tiniest puff. As I said at the top, I smoke at this point maybe once a month. I take one puff of Granddaddy Purple. You know the Granddaddy?
Yes.
Yeah, which is an indica, because I told the guy I just want to melt into the couch and watch TV, and that's it. And it's once a month, one puff, I'm good to go. But something about weed is different than other drugs, because people that use it a lot seem to, I think George Carlin did a bit about this, they seem to not grow out of it necessarily, but it has a reverse addictive thing in some ways. You know what I mean? Some people, because for the people that get paranoid, let's say,
right,
they say, well, I don't want that anymore. And I think you would probably say, well, then maybe try an indica more than a sativa, right?
Well, yeah. What's interesting is, okay, so they've found that your body has an endocannabinoid system, right? So there are receptors in your brain and all through your body that are there to accept cannabinoids. You produce cannabinoids in your own body. You know, it's in breast milk. So they've found that what cannabis does is just, it affects your endocannabinoid system, which then brings your body into balance. And that's why it helps with so many ailments. And that's why for many years people couldn't believe that it helped with so many things. How could it do this and this and this and this? No drug does that.
Yeah.
It's because you have this built-in regulation system in the endocannabinoid system, and cannabis helps bring that into balance. So it kind of does make sense that if you're using it, and that after a certain amount of time, maybe you need to use less because
which is such an interesting thing about a drug, right? That you think, oh, you need more, you do it more, you're going to need more.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, I know that exists at some level with marijuana. That some of my friends, they need to smoke more because it doesn't hit them the way it used to, or they'll change strain or something.
Right.
But that a lot of people eventually either need much less or have much less of a desire. I mean, that doesn't fit any of the definitions of what addiction and drugs are.
Exactly. You just have to, normally with addiction, you have to keep upping the dosage. And, like for when I have an edible cookie at night, I mean, it's 12, 13 milligrams. And that's plenty for me. Yeah. And
so that may not be migraine related. That might just be
just to as a sleep aid, or if I'm feeling like it helps if your muscles are sore, just as it relaxes you. But 12 milligrams is not a lot. And if it were, if that were true, addiction and having to have more and more, I mean, I would be eating more and more cookies, and one is fine.
Right. Now these are all carb-free, right?
Yeah.
Not carb-free.